Hello everyone, viewers. We imagine the Middle Ages through a haze of romance. We see towering castles, knights in gleaming armor, and extravagant royal courts. We think of chivalry, but behind the stone walls and beneath the cathedral spires, there was another kind of craftsmanship at work, an engineering of a different sort. It wasn't designed to build, but to dismantle, to deconstruct the human body. Peace by We're talking about instruments of pure terror. Each one a masterpiece of cruelty designed to break the human spirit long before the heart stopped beating. Today we journey into the workshops of hell itself. We are going to uncover the 7 most horrifying torture devices from medieval Europe. Be warned, this is not a journey for the faint of heart. The first stop on our tour of terror takes us not to a hidden... This was not a secret horror, but a public spectacle. At its heart was a device that looked almost harmless from a distance. A large wooden spoked wheel like one from a giant's cart, mounted on a pole. This was the Catherine wheel, or as it was more commonly known, the breaking wheel. But it wasn't designed to carry anything, it was designed to shatter everything. Imagine the scene. The town crier has a crowd gathers, a strange mixture of morbid curiosity and grim satisfaction on their faces. Children are hoisted onto their father's shoulders for a better view. This is theatre, a lesson in power and consequence, and the star of the show is the condemned man, dragged from his cell and bound not to the wheel itself, but to the ground. His limbs, his arms and legs, are stretched out and tied to... The executioner, often a man of immense physical strength, steps forward. He isn't holding an axe. He is holding a heavy iron bar, or sometimes the wheel itself. The silence in the square is absolute, broken only by the whimpers of the condemned and the flutter of pigeon wings. The first blow is aimed at the right shin. The sound is unmistakable, a wet, sickening crack of bone followed by a scream. The crowd gasps. Some cheer. Others look away, but they don't leave. The executioner moves methodically. The left shin, the right femur. The left femur, the arms are next. Each strike is deliberate, precise. The goal is not to kill, not yet. The goal is to break every major bone in the body, transforming the human form into a boneless, bleeding sack. The victim is screaming, begging for the end, but the end is a luxury they will not be granted quickly. They are being systematically deconstructed while still alive, their skeleton turned to rubble within their own skin. Once the breaking is complete, the true artistry of the wheel begins. The executioner and his assistants lift the now horrifically pliable body of the condemned. They begin to weave it, like legs are bent backwards at impossible angles, arms twisted and threaded over and under the wooden beams. The broken limbs offer no resistance. The body is contorted into a grotesque parody of a human, a living, breathing, screaming sculpture of pain, and then the wheel is hoisted high into the air on its pole, to be displayed for all to see. This was the final. The victim, now a broken mess of flesh and bone, is left there, under the sun for the crows and the elements. Death would come slowly from shock, from dehydration, from blood loss, or from birds pecking at their eyes and open wounds. Sometimes a coup de grâce, a stroke of mercy, was granted. This was a direct, powerful blow to the chest or head, a quick end to the suffering. But this was a mercy that had to be earned or paid for by the victim's family for the truly reviled. There was no mercy. They were left on the wheel, their groans and whimpers a soundtrack to the daily life of the town for hours, sometimes even days. The breaking wheel was more than a tool of execution. It was a message, a billboard of terror erected by the authorities. It said, "This is what happens when you... We own your death, and we can make it last as long as we please." It turned a human being into a public art installation of suffering, a warning that lingered in the air long after the last scream had faded. From the open square we descend into the suffocating darkness of the interrogation chamber. Here pain is not a public spectacle, but an intimate, private affair between the interrogator and the accused. And in the center of this room sits a deceptively simple looking object. A wooden pyramid, its point sharpened to a cruel tip, mounted on a sturdy 3-legged stool. This is the Judas cradle. Its name whispers of betrayal, and its function is a perversion of both rest and justice. The process began with the victim being stripped naked. Humiliation was always the prelude. Ropes are looped around their wrists or armpits, and they are hoisted into the air by a pulley system directly above the pyramid's point. The interrogator stands nearby, calm, perhaps even bored. He asks a question. Did you conspire against the Duke? Are you a heretic? The denial comes, choked with fear. And then the interrogator gives a signal to his assistant. The victim's own body weight becomes the instrument of their torture. The sharp point of the pyramid meets their body. It is designed to be placed in the most sensitive of areas, the anus for men, the vagina for women. The pain is immediate, sharp and violating. But it is not yet at its peak. The interrogator repeats his question. Another denial. The ropes are lowered. Another. The victim might try to resist, to hold themselves up with their muscles, to fight against their own gravity. But this is a battle they cannot win. Exhaustion is inevitable. Every twitch, every tremble, every desperate attempt to find relief only serves to impale them further. The pain is not a clean cut. It is a slow, grinding, stretching agony. The pyramid is designed not to pierce vital organs immediately, but to tear muscles, to stretch orifices to their breaking point. It was a duel between the victim's endurance and the unyielding laws of physics. Hours could pass like this. The interrogator could leave, have a meal, and return to find the victim still suspended in this state of perpetual agony. Their will being eroded with every passing. Any relaxation of the muscles would result in a fresh wave of blinding pain as they slipped further onto the point. But the physical pain was only one part of the horror. The Judas cradle was a tool of profound psychological and sexual violation. It attacked the victim's dignity, their very sense of self. It was a monstrously intimate assault designed to break them on a level far deeper than bone and it came from infection. The wooden point was rarely, if ever, cleaned. It was a breeding ground for bacteria, introducing filth deep into the victim's body. Even if a confession was extracted and the victim was released from the cradle, they were often already handed a death sentence, fated to die days later from a raging, untreatable infection. The Judas cradle was a masterpiece of insidious cruelty. It used the victim's own body against them, turning their weight into a weapon and their endurance into a curse. It required no brute force from the executioner, only patience. It was a slow, quiet, and deeply personal hell, engineered to make the victim beg for an end that would only come when their mind, body, and soul were utterly and completely shattered. The tools of the medieval torturer were often designed with the punishment was made to fit the crime, or at least the sin, as defined by the church or state. And for those accused of certain transgressions, blasphemy, heresy, lying under oath, or what was deemed unnatural sexuality, there was a special device, a tool designed to punish the very organs associated with the sin. It was called the pear of anguish. At first it is a small mechanical object shaped like a pear. It is made of iron or brass, comprised of several spoon-like segments or petals that are held together at the top. At the bottom is a key, a screw mechanism. It looks more like a strange ornament than a weapon, but this pear was designed to be planted in the human body, and when it ripened, it brought forth a fruit of pure agony. Depending on the alleged, for blasphemers and liars, it was the mouth. For women accused of consorting with the devil or inducing abortions, the vagina. For men accused of homosexuality, the anus. The process was a cold, clinical violation. The pear, in its closed state, was forced into the chosen orifice. The metal was cold, unyielding. The initial act was brutal. Once the device was in place, the torturer would take the key at the base and begin to turn it, slowly, methodically. Inside the body, a nightmare was unfolding. The screw mechanism caused the metal petals of the pear to expand, to open up like a grotesque flower in bloom. The effect was catastrophic. In the mouth, the jaws would be forced open, dislocated, and eventually shattered. The victim could not scream, only produce a choked, gurgling sound as their own throat was torn apart from the inside. The expansion would continue until the skull itself fractured under the pressure. In the other orifices, the horror was just as profound. The petals, often lined with sharp points or barbs, would expand, tearing delicate internal tissues, ripping muscles, and shattering pelvic bones. The internal hemorrhaging would be massive. The pain, indescribable. It was a destruction that originated from the very core of the victim's body. The pair of anguish was not typically a tool of execution, though death from blood loss or shock was a common outcome. Its primary purpose was confession and punishment. The expansion could be done slowly, incrementally, a turn. It could also be used as a gag to silence a victim while other tortures were being performed on their body, adding another layer of horror to their ordeal. Even if the victim survived, they were mutilated for life. The internal damage was permanent and devastating, the psychological scars unimaginable. The pair represented a terrifyingly specific form of cruelty. It sought to destroy the part of the body associated with the sin, to silence the blasphemer's tongue, to ravage the organs of illicit pleasure. It was a tool that turned the body's own cavities into a torture chamber, a personal contained hell from which there was no escape. It was a mechanical monster that bloomed only once, leaving behind nothing but ruin. The human mind can conceive of. If you find this exploration into the shadows of history compelling, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us continue to unearth these forgotten stories. Now, let's descend deeper. In the world of medieval torture, there is a famous device known as the rack. Its principle is simple and horrifying: to stretch a human body until the joints dislocate and the limbs are. But what if I told you there was another device? An instrument born in the infamous Tower of London that was designed to do the exact opposite. It wasn't about stretching, it was about compression. It was nicknamed the Scavenger's Daughter, and its embrace was fatal. The device itself is an A-frame metal contraption, a collection of hoops, shackles, and hinges. To the untrained eye, it looked, but its inventor, Sir William Skeffington, a lieutenant of the Tower of London during the reign of King Henry VIII, knew precisely what he was creating. He was building a machine to fold a man in half. The victim was forced to kneel, placing their head onto a bar at the top of the frame. Their wrists were shackled to the middle of the frame, and their ankles were shackled to the bottom. They were now locked into a horrifying prayer, but this was not a posture of supplication. It was the beginning of a living nightmare. The torturer would then operate a screw mechanism, tightening the frame, compressing it. The A-frame would slowly close like a giant iron book. The effect on the human body was beyond brutal. The victim was forced into an increasingly acute fetal position. The spine was bent to its breaking point. The body was being compacted, crushed under its own leveraged weight. The pressure was immense. The victim would feel their ribs begin to crack, then shatter, threatening to pierce their own lungs and heart. Blood would be forced from the nose, the ears, the mouth. The sheer compression on the torso would make it impossible to breathe. The victim would be suffocating while simultaneously being crushed. It was a contest to see what would give out first, their bones or their lungs. It was an inverted form of torture. Unlike the rack which pulled you apart, the Scavenger's Daughter forced you into yourself, making your own body the instrument of its destruction. The horror was claustrophobic, intimate, and absolute. There was no room to move, no room to breathe, just the relentless, tightening pressure. Sir William Skeffington allegedly conceived of his device as a more merciful alternative to the rack, a way to extract confessions without permanently dislocating limbs. But this was a cruel joke. The internal damage caused by the Scavenger's Daughter was catastrophic. Massive internal bleeding, crushed organs, and a shattered rib cage were common outcomes. Death was often the result, even if it wasn't the stated intention. There's a chilling symmetry to the Scavenger's Daughter and the rack. They were like two dark gods pulling in opposite directions. One tore you from your own center, the other crushed you into it. The Scavenger's Daughter represents a particularly English brand of methodical cruelty, a product of the political and religious turmoil of the Tudor era. It was a machine designed to make a man disappear into himself, to squeeze the truth and life out of him in a final, agonizing act of compression. Its legacy is a testament to the fact that there is more than one way to break a man. You can pull him apart, or you can crush him until there is nothing left. Now we come to a device whose purpose is so straightforward, so brutally simple, that it strikes a primal chord of fear in all of us. There is no It is a tool of pure mechanical violence, aimed at the one part of us that holds our identity, our thoughts, our very consciousness, the head. It is called, plainly and terrifyingly, the head crusher. The device consists of a simple metal frame, a chin plate at the bottom where the victim's jaw is placed, a threaded steel bolt descending from a cap that fits over. Its simplicity is its genius and its horror. The victim is restrained, their head locked into this metal vise. They are facing their tormentor, able to see the calm, deliberate expression on his face as he places his hand on the screw. The first turn is slow, the metal cap descends, making contact with the skull. The chin is pushed firmly into the plate below. The victim feels the pressure begin to build. It is uncomfortable. The victim, perhaps defiant, refuses to answer. Another turn of the screw, the pressure increases exponentially. The first sound is a soft crack, almost like biting into a piece of hard candy. It is the sound of the victim's teeth shattering in their mouth, crushed against each other by the immense force. Pieces of enamel and dentin fill their mouth, and blood begins to seep from their lips. The pain, the jawbone, unable to withstand the pressure, dislocates with a sickening pop. Then it fractures. The pain is a white-hot explosion inside their skull. They try to scream, but their broken jaw can only produce a muffled, inhuman sound. The device continues its descent. The skull, which we think of as our strongest defense, begins to yield. The cranial bones groan under the eyes, under unimaginable pressure from within, are forced from their sockets. They bulge, then pop, dangling against the victim's cheeks by their optic nerves. The victim is likely still conscious, experiencing a sensory overload of pure, hellish agony. They can feel their own skull being deformed, their brain being compressed. The final turns of the screw are almost an anticlimax. The brain matter and cerebrospinal fluid are squeezed out through the eye sockets and ears. Death is finally granted. The head crusher was a tool of absolute destruction. It was not designed for prolonged suffering in the same way as the Judas cradle. It was designed for a relatively swift but excruciatingly painful journey from defiance to death. It was a way of demonstrating ultimate power. By destroying the head, the torturer was destroying the person. They were reducing a human being with all their thoughts, memories, and beliefs to a mess of shattered bone and ruined tissue. The psychological terror of this device cannot be overstated. The victim was fully aware of what was happening, step by agonizing step. They could feel their own body being destroyed from the top down. They could hear. It was an execution that forced the victim to be a conscious participant in their own obliteration. Of all the devices we will discuss, this one is perhaps the most visceral, a direct and brutal assault on the very seat of our humanity. There is a name that echoes through the halls of horror, a legend, so potent it has become a staple of Gothic fiction and heavy metal album covers. It is a sarcophagus, an upright. Its door, when opened, reveals not a velvet lining, but a forest of long iron spikes. This is the Iron Maiden. But here the story takes a fascinating turn, because for all its fame, for all its terrifying imagery, the Iron Maiden as we know it might be a ghost, a historical phantom pieced together from later accounts and morbid imaginations. Most modern historians agree that a device like the most famous example, the Iron Maiden of Nuremberg, was actually constructed in the late 18th century, long after the era of Inquisition and witch trials. It was a macabre curiosity, a pastiche of medieval horrors created for a museum of curiosities. So, if it wasn't real, why is it on this list? Because the fi of the Iron Maiden is so powerful, so psychologically terrifying, that it reveals more about our fear of the past than the past itself. Let's imagine, for a moment, that it was real. Let's step into the legend. The accused is brought before the maiden. The grim, impassive face of the sarcophagus stares back at them. The heavy iron door is swung open, creaking on its ancient hinges. The spikes are revealed. They are not random. They are placed with anatomical precision, but they are deliberately positioned to avoid piercing the vital organs. The heart, the lungs, the major arteries, all are spared. This is not a machine for a quick death. This is a machine for a slow, bleeding vigil. The victim is forced inside. The space is claustrophobic, cold. The smell of old iron and dried blood fills their nostrils, and then the door begins to close. They pierce the skin of the arms and legs, sending jolts of pain through the body. The victim is pinned, unable to move. Then the longer spikes press home. They slide into the flesh, deep into the muscle. The pain is all-encompassing, but still no fatal wound. The door is shut completely. Now the true horror begins. The victim is entombed in darkness. The world is reduced to the sound of their own frantic heartbeat and the slow, steady drip of their own blood pooling at their feet. They can't scream properly. The coffin is too constricting, and a spike in their shoulder might punish any significant movement. Hours pass. The bleeding continues. Weakness sets in. The pain is a constant, throbbing presence. This is the psychological gene. It combines multiple primal fears: claustrophobia, the fear of small spaces; nyctophobia, the fear of darkness; and a profound fear of being pierced and bleeding to death slowly. The victim is left alone with their pain and their terror, to contemplate their slow demise in a cold iron womb. Death would be an agonizingly slow process, a gradual fate. Whether a historical fact or a ghoulish invention, the Iron Maiden holds its power because it is a perfect symbol. It represents a personalized, inescapable doom, a death that is both intimate and coldly mechanical. It is the embodiment of the medieval dungeon in a single object, a final, terrifying embrace from which no one returns. Our final journey takes us not to medieval, for it is here that a device was born so monstrous, so diabolical in its ingenuity, that its legend of terror echoed for centuries, influencing the very concept of hell on earth. It was a device that fused art, engineering, and sadism into a single, terrifying form. The brazen bull. The story goes that a bronze worker named Perilos of Athens came to the court of Phalaris. He would construct a new instrument of execution, one that would provide the tyrant with both justice and entertainment. His creation was a hollow statue of a bull, cast entirely from bronze, with a door on its side. It was a masterpiece of metallurgy, life-sized and terrifyingly realistic. But its true genius lay in its internal design. The condemned would be locked inside the hollow belly of the bull. The bronze would slowly heat up, turning the interior of the bull into a furnace. The victim would essentially be roasted alive, but this is where Perilos added his masterstroke of cruelty. He had designed a complex system of tubes and pipes that led from the bull's interior to its nostrils. This acoustic apparatus was engineered to do one thing: to take the victim's frantic, agonized screams and transmute them. The sound would travel through the pipes, being modulated and amplified, so that what emerged from the bull's mouth was not the sound of a person dying in agony, but the bellowing, enraged roar of a bull. Phalaris was reportedly delighted with the invention. The fusion of art and death, the transformation of human suffering into an animalistic spectacle, appealed to his tyrannical nature. He could execute his enemies while being entertained by the music of his bronze beast. But the story takes a darker, more ironic turn. To test the device, Phalaris commanded its inventor, Perilos, to climb inside and demonstrate the acoustics. Perilos, proud of his work, complied. As soon as he was inside, Phalaris ordered the door locked and the fire lit. The tyrant leaned in close, listening with satisfaction as Perilos's terrified cries were twisted into the angry bellows of the bull. True to his sadistic nature, Phalaris did not let the inventor die inside his own creation. He had him removed from the bull just before he expired, only to then have him thrown from a cliff. The brazen bull became the symbol of Phalaris's reign of terror. It was the ultimate It didn't just kill them. It annihilated their humanity in their final moments, turning their screams of pain into a sound of brute, animal fury for the amusement of their killer. It stole their voice, their last act of defiance or despair, and turned it into a theatrical effect. The legend of the brazen bull persisted through the Roman era and into the Middle Ages, becoming it was often cited as a punishment reserved for the worst of Christian martyrs. While its widespread use in the medieval period is historically unlikely, its story was a powerful tool. It set the standard for what constituted hellish punishment. It was a machine that consumed a person whole, body and soul. It was not just an execution, it was an erasure. And in a final, fitting twist of fate, legend says that the tyrant Phalaris himself was eventually overthrown and became the last victim of the brazen bull, his own screams providing the final concert for his monstrous creation. These devices, from the public horror of the breaking wheel to the mythological terror of the brazen bull, are more than just historical artifacts. They are windows. They show us that cruelty is not just about causing pain. It can be creative, methodical, even artistic in its application. They were tools of power designed to control populations through fear, to extract confessions through agony, and to destroy enemies in the most theatrical and soul-crushing ways imaginable. They remind us that the line between civilization and barbarism is terrifyingly thin, and that the shadows cast by... What does it say about humanity that we can engineer such perfect systems of suffering? All right, that is all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and give it a like to support us. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.